in this last segment, we had two options. One was to talk about the value and significance of peer learning. And with Ja, this is something, and with Charlotte, this is something we constantly discuss because it is at the heart of the learning process for the Geneva Learning Foundation. The way we build programs, is based on what we think is the value of peer learning. But I think we will leave that one for the next dialogue because there's something else happening which is much more tied to current events, and that is the impact of COVID and work. And with Bill Gardner and Bill Wiggenhorn in the room, I think we have to go there. And I want to take you now to New York City and to the CEO of the investment bank Morgan Stanley. I think this is territory or the corner of the universe that the Bills in the room may be familiar with in some ways. So this is a June 15th article. Now, this is from the New York Post. Don't make any judgments about my reading habits. But what was really interesting, I thought, was, let's see, where's the quote? Yeah. Morgan Stanley's CEO says, "Make no mistake about it. We do our work inside Morgan Stanley offices, and that's where we teach. That's where our interns learn. That is how we develop people." So this is James Gorman saying this during the annual U.S. Financials, Payments, and CRE conference from the bank's Midtown office. And then he also makes the point, if you can go into a restaurant in New York City, you can come into the office. Now, of course, things are constantly changing because of the Delta variant. We happen to be our largest community at the foundation is a community of immunization professionals. So there are people, we know that those of you who are listening, many of you have a lot of knowledge and expertise on this. Now, this was in June, but a month later, James Gorman says, "I fundamentally believe the way you and I develop our career is by being mentored and by watching and experiencing the professional skills of those who came before us. You can't do that sitting at home by yourself. There's a limit to Zoom technology," he adds. And then there's this article from Google that reflects a different kind of corporate culture. This is the Google CEO saying, "I know this past year hasn't been easy for anyone. Many Googlers are still suffering as the pandemic wears on. We will get through it together as a Google community. I'm profoundly optimistic that once we do, we'll be able to come back together in our offices to see all the people we have missed. The future of work is flexibility. The changes above our starting point to help us do our very best work and have fun doing it." Now, those of us who work in digital learning have been asking ourselves, after the sort of emergency pivot to online learning, what's the sort of complex chain of events and sort of perceptions and actions? Are we going to try to go back to the way it was? And is that even an option in countries where less than 1% of the population is vaccinated? That's another question. I want to start here with Bill Gardner, then Bill Wiggenhorn, and then we also want to hear from Katyusha, Charlotte, and Ja on this one.
Okay, this is a topic that is part of the discussion I have with every executive that I'm coaching currently. And as you were posing the question, I was trying to think if I could have a meta answer to this, and the answer is no. I can't have a meta answer because every company that I'm involved with is planning to do the reentry differently. For example, a financial institution, since you use Morgan Stanley, a financial institution I'm working for, the vice president I'm working with there has said that part of what has happened is the prevailing wisdom had always been that employees had to be in the building in coats and ties, suits and ties for the men, and a professional dress for women. And they didn't lose productivity. They've actually gained productivity. The exception being customer-facing people. They obviously have to be in the situation where they can hand out money or take money in or whatever. But the employees have been empowered or have empowered themselves in that case to say, we're willing to come back to work, but we're not willing to come back to work 5 days a week, 8 to 5 or whatever the hours are. because we're being more productive. There's no commute. So that's a couple of hours given back to us, which sometimes we use for the company, sometimes for ourselves. There's no commute. There's no extended period of time to get ready and professional clothes or take things by the dry cleaners and things like that. So they are trying to figure out how can we keep the culture which we've established and the learning opportunities that we've established, and do it where employees have more freedom to determine where they are working and how they are working. On the other hand, I have another CEO that sounds like the Morgan Stanley guy who said, once this has gotten to a place where we can all be safe together, we're going to all be together. And they started to experience some turnover from employees who just have said, no, I'm no longer willing to spend so much of my time on the road or so much of my time unproductively to get to you so I can sit in an office and work. So I think one of the issues that we're having as a meta issue is that we're still talking about this either or thing. And my belief is almost every company is going to have some type of blend. That there are going to be times when employees need to be together in the office. There is going to need to be a part on the leadership to figure out how to make those times when everybody's in the office more productive and more, more attractive to people, so they actually want to come. Let's say we say everybody has to be in the office on Wednesday, the rest of the week, do what you and your manager work out. They need to make that Wednesday a time that people look forward to instead of, oh no, I have to go to the office today. So I believe that we're going to come out of this with an innovative redesign of organizations. And I'll just say this too. I have one client who has last December, they let all of their regional office building leases go. And they told the employees on those far-flung offices, we're going to give you some money to support you set up a home office, and we're going to use the money we save from that commercial real estate to bring everybody, it's a smaller company, but to bring everybody here to Austin for a week, maybe every other quarter. And we're going to have a lot of time together to work, and we're going to have a lot of time to play in the evenings. We're going to do great meals and stuff like that. So I don't think we know what's going to come out of it, but we do know it's going to be more complex than 8 to 5. Everybody has to be in the office in every company.
Yeah. Very interesting. What struck me, I'll tell you what struck me, is that when James Gorman says that's where we teach, that's where our interns learn, I think that's the first time I've ever seen a CEO that like the main justification for people sharing a physical space is learning. He's not talking about them going to training. He's recognizing that learning is embedded in work. And that's a big shift. Yes, I thought that was, in a way, that was really impressive, even if it's embroiled in the sort of relations with the complex relations with staff and changes in sort of people's behavior in work. Bill Wiggenhorn, if you are James Gorman's chief learning officer, what do you advise him and why?
Well, I remember reading that article. And at first I was taken aback by it, saying, how dare he tell everyone the only way they can do work is to show up and go back to the old way. But when he goes on to describe this, really, it's a community building exercise by being there. It's sharing the values. It's beginning to let people watch others as their mentors. It started to make sense. However, if you look at a lot of the high-tech firms, the people are very comfortable working remotely. And I agree with Bill. I think in many of those firms, it's going to be a change model, which will be a mix of coming together and working separately. As an introvert, I think this has been great because you have more time by yourself. You can kind of control who you're going to be working with, and you don't spend all the time on the office politics. Now, if I was at CLO, I guess I would look at understanding better the employees that we want to train and develop and make sure that their values and how they think they're going to learn is similar to how the CEO thinks it should be done. And when there is a difference between those, figure out a process by which he can learn from them what they expect and how his own goals can be accomplished. I don't think it's the right thing to go in and just say you're wrong, but I think you have to help that CEO discover that maybe he could be wrong and there's a better way of doing it.
Yeah.
A couple of the senior executives I talked to have actually gotten to enjoy this remote working, enjoy not traveling. And matter of fact, we just had a review with one of the financial officers this past week who's always traveling. He talked about how much he enjoyed not traveling, and I kind of insisted that we get together. And then the more I reflected about it, I thought it was really one of our most productive meetings because we didn't waste any time. We were able to really focus, and we're able to invite others in who geographically weren't here. So, I just think you have to help that leader discover the new way of doing things, but at the same time, making sure that what he thinks needs to be accomplished can be accomplished.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. I think it's a terrific insight to recognize that, that daily interaction in a shared physical space is where where most significant learning happens. I do think there's one key point that's being missed is when he says you can't do that sitting at home by yourself, there's a limit to Zoom technology. That is undeniable. Okay, we've all experienced it, even on this call with like muting, unmuting, but it's limited today, but what matters is the rate at which it is changing. And going back to the office, they're saying that the only way to teach and learn and develop people is to do it the way it has been done in the past. All that's going to do, in a way, is going to slow the rate of the digital transformation for that organization, for the organizations that make that choice to try to revert back, to do the reset backwards.